All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Just going to get a couple things situated here and then we'll get started. We are doing this on a different day at an earlier time for two reasons. One, to annoy everybody. It's what we do. And two, because I'm going to be out of town tomorrow. So I wanted to get this in. And for anyone who is interested, next weekend, July 31st to August 2nd, there is a conference happening outside of Nashville, Tennessee. It's called NanoCon, and that is the website if you'd like to visit. There are tickets available, lots of really cool speakers, people I'm really excited to meet. So if you're in the Nashville area or that's drivable for you, check it out. And okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with a bunch of stories so I can get through them. Jess is here behind the scenes. She's reading the comments. She's making sure I see them in between stories. So leave your thoughts in the chat and I will get to them in between stories. And you remember you should sign up for the newsletter at friendlyatheist.com. And you can also go to patreon.com/Hemant and support the channel, support me, whatever you like to do. All right. I have no idea how many people are going to show up because I know this is an awkward time, but we'll get started here. Okay. I need to tell you about what happened on a Native American reservation that is in Wyoming right now. Because here's the situation that I feel has gone viral in a sense that it is galvanizing a whole bunch of people who are tired of being oppressed. This takes place in the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming. It's the home for, among other people, the Northern Arapaho tribe. And it's also home to a woman named Sarah Lucas, who runs the Foundations for Nations Church. And it took me a little bit to make sense of this. The reservation is there, but then there is private property within the reservation, and it is on a plot of private property that this church exists. And so Sarah Lucas has been there for several years now, but she recently, right before July 4th, she was telling her congregation, which includes a lot of people who are part of these tribes, she was telling them that they need to reject tribal traditions because that is like worshiping false idols. And she specifically targeted Sundance, which is the tribe's most sacred ceremony, according to a lot of online resources. And I am going to play for you just a short excerpt of her clip. I should also mention the church has taken down the entire sermon from the internet, but I was able to dredge up like the 20 minutes of when she spoke. And so this is a very short excerpt of it. The internet lives forever. This is what she was telling her congregation about what the Arapaho people were doing.
A pipe can't not hear your prayers. It's just a piece of material, right? And this is the cycle that they're caught up in. This is all they ever known. And the Lord is saying, tear down the idols, tear down the altars, the idol worship.
That's how she's treating her neighbors. So, yeah, this is what these people do. This is all they know. This is the cycle they're caught up in. There's something wrong with everyone around us, many of whom are your friends and neighbors in this congregation. But we have to tear down the idols, tear down the altars, and the idol worship. Which, look, here's the thing. I know that's the thing Christians believe. But if you set up shop in, at least on an Indian reservation, whether it's private space or not, tact matters. I mean, this is a thing I'm sure they teach missionaries. If we send you somewhere to preach the word of God, you should kind of know where you're going so you could speak their language so that what you say doesn't sound culturally tone deaf. And this woman lacks all of that. This is Sarah Lucas when she was setting up shop a couple of years ago. But the reason people heard that sermon is because an indigenous actor, Christian Wasana, he posted an excerpt of that sermon on his social media, and he's popular enough that when he posted it, It went viral. And this is what he said at the time. It feels like history repeating itself with attempts to erase and discredit our traditional way of life. He said, our ceremonies and way of life are a way of healing, identity, and connection for our people. And by claiming that one path is the only path, while belittling and condemning ours, is deeply disheartening. He saw it as a sign of disrespect, which I agree with. Um, he added that this is like me walking into your church and mocking the cross, which he wouldn't do even if he doesn't worship those symbols. So I will flat out say, you know what I think about Christianity. I'm not a Christian for a reason. I don't believe any of it. What do I think of the tribal traditions and their spiritual beliefs? I don't believe in them either. But I also don't go out of my way to say, haha, you're all idiots, because I don't believe that. I think everyone has their different ways to get through stuff. And if the tribal traditions are the things that bring them closer together after a history of, other people trying to eradicate them, okay, I get that. Not everything functions in the way, like some spiritual way, I believe this pipe is going to do something. It doesn't matter what you think about it. It's meaningful to them. Let them have it. You know what I mean? So for this lady to be on the reservation and saying, haha, this thing doesn't do anything, it shows a deep disrespect to her own neighbors who she is trying to convert. And also, I mean, it's a hallmark of religion to say everyone else is doing things the wrong way, but I have found the truth. And evangelical Christians are notorious for that. But the other thing is, this is not some outsider who is on day one of spending time on this reservation. She's been there for years. And elsewhere in the sermon, she fully acknowledged how this might come across, because she said she risks being persecuted for saying any of this stuff, because you know who's really persecuted on a Native American reservation? It's the white people. But she did it anyway because she doesn't care. So after she did that, there was backlash among the Arapaho people. This is an amazing article because of the pictures. But a pipe cannot hear your prayers. Northern Arapaho tribal members protest. Yeah, they showed up outside of her church. And this case, that's outside of her food pantry, saying nothing other than, we disagree with you and how dare you disrespect us. Many of these protesters, I want to add, are Christians themselves, but it doesn't mean they're okay with other people trashing their customs and their beliefs. I want to show you some of the things that were said in this article. Look at these signs, too. They're quoting the Bible. Love thy neighbor as thyself. What judgment ye shall be judged. Like, yeah, golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, right? But look at what one person said. The creator is the same. It's the same as who they worship. Anywhere we go, it's the creator that we talk to. So no apology accepted. Don't worry, she wasn't offering one. They said what they said. They've done the damage. They need to go. Interesting thought. We'll come back to that in a second. Local indigenous rights advocate Big Wind Carpenter said that traditional native beliefs in Christianity don't have to be mutually exclusive, and added, this land was given to churches. You've seen St. Stephen's Mission, and I think it's a prime example of how a group can come in and actually respect those people's ways. St. Stephen's Church has never treated us like that, has never said it's one way or the other, that it's black or white. They have actually accepted a lot of our traditions, because that's what you do when you're a good neighbor and these people welcome you into their home. You respect them. That is not what is happening with Sarah Lucas's church. So people were mad. I'll show you this one too. What is this? Respect our ancestors, respect our ways. Great sign right there. So these people were protesting. Very interesting. So what happened as a result of the protest? Because they were urging people not to go to this church. They were urging this church to get off their land. Well, at some point, as these protests started happening, I also want to show you this. They planned a meeting with Sarah Lucas and leaders of her church. And after they planned it, I want to show you this post from Chris Friday, who is a local organizer in that community. He held up a flag outside, I think that's the food pantry, but look at what he said here. We won. We won. Victory. Sarah Lucas was a no-show. They were scared out. Here she is speaking down on us as Arapaho. He also pointed out on here. I want to show you one other part. Look at what he says in this part of the post. Let's continue to boycott the Foundations for Nations ministries. Don't go to their food bank. Don't go to their events. Don't let your children go. We want them out of Arapaho land forever. They no longer are welcome here. So this is actually escalating things, because it's not just we're upset with you. He is telling members of his tribe, don't go to her church. You might send your kids there because you think church is where they're going to learn morals. You may attend yourself because you're Christian. Don't go to her church. I'm not saying don't believe what she believes, but you don't have to reward her for what she is doing. And again, this guy is a big organizer in the community. So after all this, the two sides actually did end up meeting at some point, and you will not be shocked to learn they came to zero compromise, because Sarah Lucas was like, I didn't say anything wrong. And the native tribe is like, but you did. Respect us. And she's like, no, I'm a Christian. I don't need to. And then she said this to a reporter. You could take everything from me, but you can't take my God. I'm willing to be martyred for the faith. I've counted the cost. Like, martyred for the faith? You said something stupid. People called you out on it. You are not the victim here. But she's acting like it, because that's one thing conservative Christians know how to do. It's pretend to be victims. She's not a martyr. She's just an arrogant preacher who assumes she knows better than everyone around her, and she would rather destroy an entire community than live in a society where not everyone shares her views. So reporters also talked to other members of this tribe. This is a fascinating interview with Christian Wasana, who was the guy who originally spread the sermon. Look at what he said. Tribal members are still wrestling with troubling treatments by past Christian-affiliated missions, such as the boarding schools that forbade the children from speaking their native languages. He said Indian boarding schools proliferated in the nation a century ago, many run by religious groups and funded with federal money. Historical accounts tell of tribal leaders who wanted their kids to gain an education, a federal government that wanted to assimilate the kids, and religious leaders who wanted to convert them. And it doesn't matter if you're looking in the United States or you're looking in Canada, there is no shortage of stories of Christian ministries, Christian missionaries hosting these schools where they brought in Native American children, tried to convert them, in many cases killed them, left their bodies for dead. They are buried under the grounds of those schools. It's horrific what these missionaries did to those tribal groups. And that history is not like far away. It is in the recent past. And so when you consider all that and you see another white woman, another white Christian saying, I'm going to set up shop in your territory, not only am I going to try to convert you, I'm going to tell my congregation that the things you do are evil because they're drawing people away from Jesus. History rhymes, at the very least. So anyway, I want to show you what the church did this week. According to someone who got a copy of an email they sent out to their supporters, this is the email right here. Dear partners of Foundations for Nations, I'm going to scroll down for a bit. Because of the since then, we have received ongoing death threats and threats to burn our church. These threats have been coming daily. Those are bad. I don't condone any of that. But she's not providing evidence of any of this, so I don't know what to make of it. However, what does she say? Because of the severity of the situation, both the FBI and local law enforcement are now involved. So what should we do? This brings us to a critical question. Should we compromise the word of God for the sake of safety, or to maintain peace with a people group? Our answer is clear. No, God's word is unchanging. And then you could see I want to scroll up. Where is the bit she said? Did I miss something? I don't think I did. Let me make sure I can scroll. Ah, there we go. Look at this bit. We own our property, and legally, we cannot be removed. This matter is now moving toward the court. We are in contact with legal counsel and are preparing to pursue this in federal court as soon as possible. Blah, blah, blah. We are asking you right here, our partners, to stand with us in this battle. We are in need of financial support to help cover the legal expenses required to continue this mission. So she and her husband are already fundraising off of this. And I just want to make very clear here, she's right that the tribe cannot boot her from the land. She's on private property. I have seen no indication they plan to sue to get her off the land. So I don't actually know why she's raising money because no one's filed any lawsuits. What they have said is, hey, people in our tribe, don't go to her church. Don't give her money. Don't send your kids there. Things like that. And that's fair game. You're allowed to do that. But I am curious where she goes with this fundraising. I don't know what she's fundraising for. No one has sued her. It's so arrogant to demand money for a court battle that doesn't exist. And I want to point out one other thing here. Sarah Lucas, and I have not seen this covered in a lot of the media coverage of this controversy. Sarah Lucas didn't come out of nowhere. She is a disciple of this guy right here, whose name is Andrew Womack, who is a Christian nationalist preacher. Andrew Womack is a lot like Doug Wilson, that Pete Hegseth extremist pastor who doesn't think women ought to vote. Doug Wilson took over Moscow, Idaho as best he could. He's trying to get his followers to set up shop in that town so they could take over the civic responsibilities of that town. They want to take over city council, school board, etc. Andrew Womack did that in a town in Colorado. His people succeeded. They took over city council and the school board. And I think I made a video about this last year. It turns out everything sucks when they're in charge. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to run a city in a secular way, and people are pissed off. But Andrew Womack's whole thing is we got to take over different areas. And this is an example of that. He sent Sarah Lucas and her husband to this reservation for the thing the reservation has seen many times in its history, which is white people coming to their area to take over their space. Andrew Womack actually raised money to help them build that church and set up shop there. So that connection only makes this all the more disturbing because this is not one pastor saying something offensive and then pretending it's everyone else's fault for calling her out on it. This is part of a larger evangelical project to take over different communities. She doesn't see her Arapaho neighbors as just humans to be friends with. She sees them as targets to convert. She's not going to rest until they're converted. And that's why she has no respect for their traditions. And when you know what Christians have done to indigenous tribes, the message has not changed, which is your ancestors were wrong, your ceremonies are evil, your culture must be destroyed. And that's why the pushback against her is not persecution. It's people fighting back against active oppression. They're not demanding Christians drop their faith because they are Christian. They're asking for mutual respect from someone who shares this space with them, and she refuses to give them any respect. She's that arrogant. So I appreciate that this tribe is fighting back. And I love that they're making it clear they are not going to be a laboratory for Andrew Womack's experiment here. So I will pause there. Are there any questions here? Otherwise, I'll move to a different story. Oh, look, a Christian claiming persecution when she was the one persecuting. I mean, this is every Christian nationalist. Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump and all those guys are like, no one likes us. No one respects us. We're being persecuted. They're always the victims. It's like you have more power than anybody. Don't pretend like you're the ones who are being attacked right now. So yeah, no different here. Maybe she should realize that other Christians don't allow female ministers. Maybe respect their Christianity. Wouldn't you love to see that? Wouldn't you love to see another church set up shop right there and basically say, don't go to that other church. They allow women to preach. That would be hilarious. I mean, horrible in the broad sense of things, but also hilarious. Where's the Spanish Inquisition? This woman should at least know what actual persecution is. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. She should. I mean, if you're setting up shop on a reservation, shouldn't you know a little about tribal history? I was talking about this on the podcast earlier. As someone who grew up in Illinois, I didn't learn a lot about tribal anything. But I imagine if you grow up in Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, you'll learn something. And if you're going to go live in that community and work in that community, shouldn't you do a little bit of reading? Or is her only knowledge about their history something she learned from Womack's church, which means nothing? All right, I'm jumping to a different story here. Give me 1 second. I got to tell you about a new performance space in Sydney, Australia, because there was a building that had been abandoned for some time, and an LGBTQ allied group basically bought out that building for the next year. Like they signed a contract, they're going to lease the space for a year and make it a performance space for shows, music, every art, everything like that. And that sounds amazing. And they actually had government support to do this, but there is controversy. Let me show you the building itself because it's kind of amazing. This is the building in Sydney, Australia. And as you could see, because there is a cross right up on top of the door, this used to be a church. And that plays a crucial role in this story. The thing is, it hasn't been a church for a while now. How long? 100 years. This building was deconsecrated in the 1930s, meaning the people who went to church there are like, this is not a church anymore. It's not sacred. We are leaving the space and going somewhere else. So in the 100 years since, it's been a children's school. It's been a theater. I don't know, like a play musical type of theater or a movie theater, but whatever religious significance it had, it stopped 100 years ago. So when this group decided they wanted to set up shop here, the New South Wales Arts Agency, like a government program, gave them a $100,000 grant to turn it into an inclusive space for artists. And that's awesome. And then the group's parent organization said, we're going to invest $650,000 into this building. And their plan was to, quote, support more than 1,500 artists, producers, performers, technicians, small creative businesses, and staff over the next year. So they were spending $750,000 to build this place up and make it a worthwhile place. So initially they called it the Unholy Playhouse, but I guess some Christians complained and the organizer said, you know what, this is not the hill we're going to die on. We'll change the name if you don't like it. They changed it to Divine Playhouse, and they had opening night last Wednesday, July 15th. And people, I mean, when they had their first show inside of there, they decided to make it as blasphemous and irreverent as they possibly could. And people knew they were going to do this, and that's why they were protesters outside the building. But let me show you this article, because look at what they did in the space. Catholic activists cited photos and videos shared from the venue's opening night, including one of a performer dressed as a pig offering McDonald's French fries as Holy Communion. Beautiful. Performers dressed as nuns waving sex toys, as they should, I guess, and drag queens reenacting the birth of Christ. The group Fit for the Kingdom called the performance hateful blasphemy that mocks what we hold most sacred. Another group, Prodigal Sons, underscored how deeply this material has wounded a community of faith. It hasn't wounded it. And I think this is important because in the last story we just discussed, we said there was a Christian minister who basically trashed Native American traditions. They're not trashing it here. They're mocking it, but also they're not saying anything about the outside world. They're saying we are allowed to do this because this is who we are, this is what we do, and these symbols were used to harm us. So we're allowed to poke fun at it. We're not telling you to do that. We're not saying you should go to churches and do this. We're not even saying Christians are bad. We're saying these symbols, which have been used historically to oppress LGBTQ people, they have no power over us anymore. So if you don't like it, too damn bad, right? So I kind of want tickets to this show already. So it doesn't matter if it was offensive or not. It was the performance was for a willing audience that went inside the building, a building that had not been a church for generations, right? No one was forced to attend, no one was forced to like it, but these people were outside complaining. And the thing about the protesters is that they did have a call to action. They were saying that they wanted the Sydney, Australia government to rescind the $100,000 grant. How dare taxpayer money be used to promote something like this? Because, as you know, the way conservatives handle art they don't like is to censor it. It's never, I don't like that, but I understand that's how art works. It's always, I don't like it, therefore no one's allowed to have any fun. All fun has to go through them. One person from the protesting group even said this, which I just found funny. This is from The Guardian. There is no shortage of venues across Sydney where the LGBTQ community is free to express itself and its artistic creativity, a spokesperson from the Prodigal Sons said. The selection of a former church is a deliberate and conscious decision. He says that as if they were walking around saying, where should our building be? Let's do a search of everything that used to be a church and take one of those spots. No, that's not how it works. They found this building. It was a perfect location, I assume. It was for the right price. They said, let's get this one. And the fact that it was a church doesn't mean anything. Because again, it was a church. It's not like it's a church every day of the week, except when they want to use it. It's not a church anymore. So no, they don't have to find another venue. You don't just get to say everything that's ever been touched by God cannot be used by anybody else. You don't get, rights in perpetuity to control everything. So it doesn't matter that this used to be a church. They don't have to go anywhere else. It's also a really nice performance space. You could do a Google search on this. You could search up church skate park, and you will find churches that are shut down now because no one's going anymore that have been converted to skate parks. They look amazing. You could find churches that have been converted to bars or restaurants. And why would they do that inside a former church? Because it looks pretty damn cool. The ambiance is amazing. You get a certain vibe when you walk into the building. It's like walking into a castle. It's just interesting. So just because Christians used to occupy the space doesn't mean anything anymore. But here's the downside. After all the protests happened on that Wednesday night, the landlords of the building decided, yeah, they have a point, and they canceled the 1-year lease. They told the organization, you can't be in here anymore. We're ripping up the contract. I didn't know they were allowed to rip up the contract just because they don't like what's being done. But they said we're canceling it. And they cited an obscure law that dates back to like 1842. Lawyers that were in media accounts about this, they said we haven't tested that law ever. So it's not like they're standing on firm legal ground here. That's a weird thing to cite. But the argument here, according to the company, is that the performers insulted and mocked Christianity. I want to find this for you here. Yeah, look at this. I want to show this to you. There we go. The next day, the landlord sent a notice of breach to the venue's organizer, Heaps Gay Events, claiming it insulted and mocked the sincerely held religious beliefs of millions of Christian Australians, and giving it 2 days to cease operation. Why does that matter? Why is a landlord allowed to break a contract because something you did insulted Christians? I didn't know that was part of the lease agreement. Who knew? Also, if you sign a lease with a group called Heaps Gay Events, what do you think is gonna go down? But the venue canceled weekend events. Its future remains uncertain. And the Divine Playhouse and Heaps Gay Instagram accounts were taken down due to complaints. Like, what the hell is going on? That is censorship, pure and simple. Now, they did get their social media accounts back after a few days, but that means right after they were kicked out, they had no way to talk to their audience. They had no way to tell their followers what's going on and galvanize support for it. Um, but think about what this is doing. If you allow protesters to dictate whether a space can be leased out to an offensive group, there's a name for that. It's a heckler's veto. It means you are allowing the complainers to dictate the terms of an agreement. You don't give in to the whiners and the protesters here. This was a fair contract. They didn't do anything illegal. So don't give in to the protesters, which is something a lot of the supporters were saying. And you know what makes that decision to kick them off their lease? You know what makes that decision even more appalling? Apparently, there is already a proposal on the table from a company that says, we want to tear down that building and certain ones surrounding it so we can put up a $55 million luxury apartment complex. Like the New South Wales elected officials, they are weighing that proposal right now. But even if it went through, and it'll probably go through, construction wouldn't start for a while. You got to get permits, you got to do all the bureaucratic stuff. That's why this building was available for the next year and only the next year. And that's why this group got it. But it tells you a lot about the protesters, doesn't it? They're really mad that people they don't like are leasing out the space and using it in their mind to blaspheme their faith. Meanwhile, another company is going to demolish the church, and the protesters have nothing to say about that. That is apparently fine. That's not desecrating it at all. But performing a show inside of the building? How dare you? So when the Divine Playhouse and its parent company got their social media back, they did finally post some updates for people. An update from Divine Playhouse. They just said, our purpose has not changed. What else is here? They said a lot, but they said we've acted in good faith. We weren't trying to be offensive. And, you know, if you complain about our name, we changed it. In any case, they then said one more thing like a day after that. And I want to show you this as well. This is what they posted the other day. Our lease has been terminated. Urgent. Please read. They tried other things. Nothing worked. So they're saying this Saturday, they're going to have a protest. It just in favor of the arts and against a Christian group dictating what should happen here. It's over at Kent Street. Our lease has been terminated. Our artists have been canceled. We're angry. Well, we can sing louder, which is a great point to make. So here's what they're doing now. They're going to protest. I don't know if they're going to go to court to fight this, but this is now a battle about free speech and censorship. And as the group pointed out somewhere in those posts, not every work is going to resonate with every person, but the freedom to make and experience art is part of what makes an open, creative, and democratic society. So right now they're looking for an alternative space, and they hope people will help protest and donate to them. There is a fundraiser online to help the group. There's a petition online with nearly 18,000 signatures. I'm going to share the link in the chat to their GoFundMe if anyone's interested. And they are calling on the Premier of New South Wales to provide emergency funding so these people can afford a different space and so they can relocate. One thing I do want to share with you is one piece of good news is that elected officials, by and large, are on the side of the artist here. This is a piece from The Guardian. The New South Wales Greens Parliament member, Kate Fairman, said Divine Playhouse should be celebrated as the kind of venue Sydney desperately needs more of, and called on the state minister for music and the nighttime economy, John Graham, to publicly defend Divine Playhouse, its organizers, staff artists, and patrons. Graham should make it clear that the government will stand with artists, venue operators, and Sydney's queer community, not with those trying to shut them down. Beautifully put. This is another comment. There is from the sorry, I think we said that one already. But that is great. I appreciate that Greens Parliament member said that. The Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, said Sydney's queer communities deserve places to create, perform, laugh, dance, and belong. And the closure of the venue was disappointing and concerning. But not everyone was on board, because guess what, like, the Premier of New South Wales said? Chris Minns told the Daily Telegraph government officials were investigating the grant application made by the venue's organizers and said it was hard to believe the building was the best location for the performances by Divine Playhouse's artists. There are millions of other venues, he said. Why does that matter? It doesn't matter if there were a million venues. This one was available. They paid the price, literally. They signed the lease. That's why it's theirs, and that's why that contract should be respected. And then another parliamentary member, Alex Greenwich, said Sydney needed a wake-up call. What has happened with Divine Playhouse is part of a worrying trend, and I'm concerned that Sydney's reputation is suffering as a global city. Uh-huh. How are they suffering? Is the place too awesome and everyone wants to visit and you can't deal with that? What the hell? So I want to show you one last thing before I move on. There is a guy named James Thorpe, who is a PhD researcher in nightlife safety. Amazing path of study. But he does a lot of work involving nightlife in Sydney. He penned a really, really good piece in The Guardian, and there are some choice excerpts from there I gotta check out here. LGBTQI plus artists have been targeted for insulting Christianity. To queer people, this feels particularly cruel. And in this, check this out. There is something rather audacious in telling queer people raised under the shadow of the cross that Christian iconography belongs exclusively to those who remained faithful to the institution. We're entitled to wrestle with it, parody it, subvert it. In many cases, it is part of our story too. Love that. He also said this: a liberal society cannot reserve public support for ideas nobody objects to. There would be precious little culture, politics, or religion left. Christians may preach, protest, and stand outside a queer venue and pray. They may tell me my life is sinful and my family is wrong. Queer artists have the same right to make art that is confronting, irreverent, and, yeah, offensive. That is the bargain we make in a liberal democracy. Beautifully put. That's from James Thorpe. By the way, he pointed out that in that article, Australia is not a Christian nation. He said that in the piece, and I'm like, oh, you're dealing with the same culture wars we are here. But this is the point. It's not a Christian nation. If Christian groups can shut down a queer venue by protesting loudly enough, every theater and museum and library should be freaked out right now. Because anything can be a disturbance if you complain loud enough. And according to the landlord, if they complain loud enough, then they should get anything they want. That's why you never cave in to what the complainers want. I do hope that the decision to cancel this lease backfires. I hope that the Christian groups get mocked for their outrage. I hope the landlords get negative press. I hope Divine Playhouse gets donations and publicity and public support, and they can move into a bigger, better venue and stage a whole bunch of these shows. That would be the beautiful outcome from all of this. And the thing is, you got to protect offensive art, even if you don't like it. I'm not saying you have to celebrate it. You got to protect it. It's not that every piece is brilliant. It's just that the very existence of that sort of art helps take away the power of some very harmful symbols. And that freedom of expression matters a hell of a lot more than how some people interpret that expression. So if Christians were offended by one evening's performance, well, guess what? Your religion has harmed countless generations of LGBTQ people, and that is way more offensive. So calm down. All right, I'm going to pause there. What questions do we have here? I'm curious how a church would be deconsecrated. Have to look it up. I was wondering that too. Like, did they take a hairdryer along all the walls and like debaptize it? I have no clue. Or did they just say some magic words and say, bibbity bobbity boo, no longer a church now? Like, is that all it took? You know that's a silly idea. I know that's a silly idea. What's up with them? They say this as if churches should always be immune to criticism. The Christian privilege is everywhere. Yeah, that's almost a running theme of a lot of the stories I have today. Christian privilege, they think they should be allowed to do anything they want and no one's allowed to push back at all. Does Australia have any type of free speech laws? I'm honestly unaware. I feel like it's not as loose as in the US, but I'm going to need commenters to weigh in on that one because I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the limitations are when it comes to free speech. All right, I'm going to jump to a different story. 1 second. All right. I got to give you an update on a story I first brought to your attention about a year ago, and it involves a young woman in Arizona. Her name is Miley, and she's a young conservative activist. She's got to be like 21, 22 years old, somewhere in there. Well, the last time I talked about her, she appeared on a conservative podcast. It's called the Maddie McCurdy program. I imagine this is just like some young conservative who says, stick a mic in my face. I have a podcast now. Let me interview my friends, which, by the way, that is 90% of podcasts, and that's fine. You can do that. That's how podcasts work sometimes. So he brought on his friend, Miley, and she was saying she did not believe women ought to be in public office. She believed women should be at home taking care of their babies. And I'm going to play for you a very short clip of what she said at the time. Whoops.
Honestly, I don't know if I would vote for any female. I don't know if female should be in office. I don't think women should hold office in general. Like, it's a man's position.
Yeah.
That's my stance. I think women should, run the home.
Yeah, women should run the home. She also said, if you're out in Congress or out doing something else, what are your kids doing? Like, it's a very trad wife sort of thinking. But listen, if that's what she wants to do with her life, become a stay-at-home mom, homeschool the 6.5 kids, okay, no one's stopping you. Go have all the babies you want. The idea, though, that all women should take the same path she wants to take and never run for office because they're better suited to be homemakers, that's ridiculous. The thing is, if these were just the ignorant, uninformed rants of some random woman in her early 20s, maybe you forget about it. Like, why are we listening to what some random woman from Arizona is saying about all this? Well, the reason I brought that up to you last year is because this is also Miley Biggs. And the reason, sorry, I'm sharing you the wrong thing. Here's what I want to share with you. This is what she posted on social media. I'm Miley Biggs. I'm running for state senate. And I'm grateful to run with great conservatives, blah, blah, blah. My parents taught me to love my country, the Constitution, and to value my freedoms. I've watched so many good people in my life serve this country in the military and in public office. I, too, seek to serve. Something, something, Jesus, something, something. That's what she did last year. She went on a podcast. And by the way, that podcast wasn't from like 7 years earlier. That podcast was from like a year before she announced her candidacy. So I made that video last year. And I forgot one thing. She went on one more podcast in like December of 2024 and she said something else. Different podcast, different random conservative dude bro. And this time the guy brought up the fact that, have you ever seen those memes online where they say here's a map of the United States, here's what the electoral college map would look like if only women voted, and it's like overwhelmingly blue? Well, the host of this show brought up that, like, oh, is doesn't that say something about women? And guess what Miley said in response to that? Here's that clip.
And we're
Really?
like, whoa.
That's interesting.
Repeal the 19th.
I don't know if you heard that, but she's like, oh, repeal the 19th. She wants to repeal the amendment that gave women the constitutional right to vote. That was her response to finding out that women, if only women voted, it would be a very blue country. So she did all that before she announced that she was going to run for office. So besides the fact that she said a lot of dumb stuff, I was curious about a couple things. Is any of that going to hurt her when the primary actually happens? Because anyone can announce their candidacy, but like, come on, you're serving red meat to opposition researchers right here. Also, if you notice, her last name is Biggs, Biggs. Her father is Andy Biggs, who is a MAGA congressman, who is an election denier, and who is running for governor of Arizona. So that's probably what got her to run for office. Her dad is running, and she's like, I can also do that. To hell with being a woman. I can do it too. So all of that happened in like, whatever, middle of 2025 or something, months after she went on those podcasts. And I was wondering, is this going to affect her in the primary? Is this going to come back to haunt her? Well, guess what? Yesterday, Tuesday, the 21st of July, that was when the Arizona primary happened. And guess how that played out? Here's how it went in Arizona. She's the only candidate for Republicans on the ballot, so she got the votes. She is the Republican nominee for state Senate in District 14. Under her, in this image that I pulled, that is the Democrat in the race, Stephanie Walsh. I know primaries are not necessarily indicative of how many people are going to vote in an actual election because no one's paying attention to any of the races. You only kind of get the diehards in these districts. Moderates usually don't weigh in here. And the candidates are not fighting each other. They're kind of fighting people in their party. So as far as I can tell, even though it's disturbing, Miley Biggs has a lot more votes there. I don't know how red this district actually is. I don't know how Stephanie Walsh will do. And I haven't seen any pushback against Miley Biggs based on what she said on those podcasts. But that may start now, since the election's going to be in November and Miley's going to be on the ballot. And so, yeah, I wanted to bring that to your attention so you could pay attention to that campaign in the months ahead. And I want to point out, I have not heard Miley address what she said on those podcasts. She hasn't said, oops, I didn't mean to say repeal the 19th. Haha, I can't even count that high. She hasn't said women should be allowed to vote. They should hold elected office. She hasn't said any of that. In fact, if you look at her social media, she hasn't campaigned like at all. I don't even know what she's doing. If you or I were campaigning for anything, for dog catcher, like I would have spent the past few months doing something, but I didn't find anything on her social media really talking about, getting people to vote for her. All she's posted are things about her dad running for governor. I don't get that as a campaign strategy, but I sincerely hope people will use her podcast appearances and her nut job dad against her, because holy shit, she could be a state senator in a matter of months. She's not running to represent women. She's running to erase them. She doesn't want to serve. She wants to rule. And she has no problem cashing in on the rights that she now wants stripped from other women. She is smiling for like a campaign photo while professing that women don't belong in public life. She is climbing up a ladder other women fought to create, and then she's pulling it up behind her because she doesn't want other women doing exactly what she's doing. So Miley is running for office. We will see where that goes in a few months. I'll be following that campaign. I'm curious if it goes anywhere. All right, I will pause there. What questions you got here? It's funny how many women Christian influencers don't live those conservative Christian values, right? They want to be homeschooling trad wives who live in the middle of a farm, and they will not tell you that that they are billionaires in real life, that they have enough money to hire tutors and hire cleaners for their home. They're not doing it themselves. They're all hypocrites. And I know it's mocked in like pop culture and yesteryear and stuff like that, but like it's very much a thing. If you think you're going to be a trad wife influencer, tell us the whole story. At least be honest about it. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Someone asked, is Miley Biggs collecting money? I mean, campaign? Yeah, you can donate to her campaign. You can donate also to Stephanie Walsh's campaign, if you were wondering. Someone points out Miley Biggs' district, Arizona 14th, is heavily Republican, which is to say she may very well be in office soon. I hope the Democrat uses all of this to her advantage. All right, let me jump to a different story here. We're going to talk about Focus on the Family, the massive evangelical nonprofit organization that now thinks of itself as a church for tax purposes, so it doesn't have to show you who its donors are. But Focus on the Family, it's based in, Colorado Springs, I believe. And they put out a post this week that was appalling. Basically, their post said, because they want to help your family, hey, all of our followers, have you ever experienced when your kids don't want to talk to you anymore? We know that sucks. Let's talk about it. We have resources for you. And before we get to all of that, I think, especially for younger viewers, it is important to go over why it's kind of appalling that Focus on the Family, of all places, said any of this. Okay? Focus on the Family is a group that has done more than most to destroy familial relationships. Okay? It was founded by a guy named James Dobson, who is now dead. Peace be upon him, wherever he is down there. James Dobson endorsed Donald Trump in like 2015. Or even in 2016, James Dobson said you could trust Trump because he was a baby Christian. And James Dobson had a lot of respect and like cachet in that community. So he was responsible for getting conservative Christians to coalesce around Donald Trump. You know who else he endorsed? Roy Moore of was it crap? I'm forgetting. Alabama. Roy Moore of Alabama. There was an article that came out in his Senate race that said Roy Moore targeted little girls. And even after that article came out, James Dobson said you should vote for Roy Moore because he's a good Christian. So that's James Dobson. But also, the reason you may have heard of James Dobson is because for decades, he promoted an authoritarian model of parenting where adults have to control their kids. How do you do it? Through fear and through pain. That's how you do it. He wrote a book in 1970 called Dare to Discipline. And that book is exactly as bad as it sounds. He later wrote books called things like The Strong-Willed Child. Because if your child says no to you, it's because there's something wrong with them and they need correcting. This is a guy who advocated beating kids into submission. In fact, that book, The Strong-Willed Child, I want to show you an excerpt from like page 4 and 5 in the book. Check this out. I've done this before, but it's important. Look at what he says here. He's talking about his little dog, Siggy, named after Sigmund Freud. And he says, like, blah, blah, blah. For 6 years, I'd given him that order at the end of each day. And for 6 years, Siggy had obeyed. On that occasion, however, he refused to budge. The doggy wasn't listening to James Dobson. when I told Siggy to leave and go to bed, Siggy wasn't doing it. And look at this now. I had seen this defiant mood before, and I knew there was only one way to deal with it. The only way to make Siggy obey is to threaten him with destruction. Nothing else works. I turned and went to my closet and got a small belt to help me reason with Mr. Freud. His wife was watching because that's what she gets off on. And look at this. I held up the belt and told my angry dog to go get into his bed. He stood his ground, so I gave him a firm swat across the rear end. I hit him again. He tried to bite me. That tiny dog and I had the most vicious fight ever staged between man and beast. This man, who is like 200 pounds at the time, is beating up a 12-pound dog. And at the end of all this, yeah, I outweighed him 200 to 12. And basically, the dog gives in. And why is he telling us that story? To open his book? Because he says, just as surely as a dog will occasionally challenge the authority of his leaders, a little child is inclined to do the same, only more so. So you have to beat your kids into submission the exact same way. Now, that was in like the 70s. If you thought over the next several decades he got any better about these issues, maybe, that book didn't age well. Nope. I want to show you what he wrote in 2015. This is on his, this is an article posted on his ministry's website in 2025, but I believe it was written in 2015. But they asked him about spanking, and look at what he said here. The spanking, why might spanking fail? That's the question, right? Someone says, I have spanked my children for their disobedience and it didn't seem to help. Does this approach fail with some children? And his answer, of course, is nope. If the spanking failed, you're the failure. And let me tell you why. The spanking may be too gentle. If it doesn't hurt, it isn't worth avoiding next time. A slap on the hand with the hand on the bottom of a multi-diapered 30-month-old is not a deterrent to anything. While being careful not to go too far, you should ensure he feels the message. Basically saying if you're hitting your kid as if there is padding on the child, you're not doing it hard enough. This is what James Dobson was saying later in his life. The man never learned anything, but this is his blueprint for domination. He taught generations of evangelical Christians that the best relationship to have with your kids is one in which parents, and by parents he means the father, always wins. You got to control them. And my God, if you have a daughter, what do? You control her. You never let her out with another boy. You control her. That's why Mike Johnson signs a purity pledge with his 12-year-old daughter who doesn't know what sex is. You sign a purity pledge until they are grown women, because they better not have done anything. And then you hand them off to their husband, at which point, magically, their sex life is wonderful. That's how purity culture works. But that's James Dobson. He didn't just offer shitty parenting advice, though. He was ignorant about sex, as I just mentioned. He pretended to be an expert at it, but no thank you. He also basically denounced all things LGBTQ. My favorite is that in 2015, he was denouncing pastors who were LGBTQ allies. And he said, do you know what the B in LGBTQ stands for? Orgies. I swear to God, that is what he said. He said, I would like them to think, talking about the pastors, I would like them to think just for a moment about LGBT. The B stands for bisexual. That's orgies. Are you really going to support this? I mean, why not? But okay. While we're at it, James Dobson blamed the Sandy Hook massacre on atheism, abortion, and same-sex marriage. He blamed a mass shooting in El Paso, Texas on, quote, the LGBTQ movement closing in on the God-inspired and established institution of the family. He signed something called the Nashville Statement, look it up, which is a declaration of faith-based bigotry. He also equated Obamacare to living in Nazi Germany. His entire career, for decades, was devoted to scaring Christians who were too dumb to realize this man has no clue what he's talking about, and he makes shit up as he goes along. His parenting advice sucked. His sex advice sucked. His political advice sucked. His idea of love was hit your kids, lie about gay people, and promote violence against trans people, which is another thing he did. I know some of you are mentioning this in the comments. Kristen Kobes Dumais, she wrote in her book Jesus and John Wayne a lot about James Dobson. And one of the things she says is Dobson, quote, corrupted a faith and fractured a nation, which is a perfect epitaph for the guy. So Dobson eventually stepped down from Focus on the Family, and then he died, and no one since has missed him. But the organization has never truly reckoned with all the shit he caused. Even James Dobson was replaced by another guy, Jim Daly, who was not nearly as much of a culture war fighter as James Dobson. He was more of I'm a business guy, and this is a big organization. That's why they brought him on. But it's not like the place is not a culture war haven. Like, it's less influential than it used to be, but it still reaches a lot of Christian families. And they still have the same message. Conservative Christian parents are right. The outside world is dangerous. And if you're a child who rejects those beliefs, there's something wrong with you. Okay? And so with that said, I need to tell you that so I can show you what they posted on social media this week. And this is the post. Family estrangement can leave parents carrying grief, unanswered questions, and a deep longing for reconciliation. Basically, hey parents, have your kids abandoned you? I know, that sucks. You want to get back together. You miss your kids, yes. And then they say rebuilding trust may require humility, a willingness to listen without becoming defensive, and the courage and humility to acknowledge where you've fallen short. They go on to say you don't have to agree on everything to stay connected. Look for common ground. Celebrate what is good and affirm the person God created them to be. ... Most importantly, don't stop praying. And the thing about this whole post, obviously the prayers are not going to help. But if you remove that, it's actually totally fine advice. Yeah, if your kids aren't talking to you anymore, what can you do? Yeah, be humble. Say you're sorry to those kids, right? Like, I'm sorry I hurt you. Don't be so defensive. That's not bad advice by itself. But when that advice comes from Focus on the Goddamn Family, that is like, what's that Tim Robinson hot dog meme? You know, we're all trying to find the guy who did this. Like, you are responsible for tearing apart all these families. How do you post something about family estrangement and not admit, hey, by the way, I know a lot of your kids don't talk to you because of us? But in the comments, a lot of people made very clear of why their kids have cut them off. And it's like Focus on the Family refuses to acknowledge this is because of them. Check out some of these. Our son cut us off and says he won't have a relationship with us until we attend therapy with his woke therapist and put our stamp of approval on his sinful lifestyle choices. In this case, our hands are tied and we're not giving in to his demands. Therefore, there is no peace. I refuse to allow his decision to rob me of living a full life. He'll always be our son and we love him, but this is his choice. Yeah. I'm sure you're the victim in all of this. And someone else chimes in, I am in the same predicament with my daughter who wants me to change my beliefs and convictions and bend a knee to woke behavior. I pray something Jesus. Like, no wonder your kids want nothing to do with you, my God. Here's another person. Different person, by the way. I'm going to the middle here. I'm not without mistakes, but one thing I know, my daughter was loved and cared for, but a crazy woke therapist has damaged my adult child's mind. I did not even know who she is now. So much hate. Here's a follow-up question. Why do you think your adult child needs therapy right now? What do you think they talk about all day when they meet? I don't know, just bringing that up. This was an interesting comment under that post. My 38-year-old daughter has been spending years in support groups and counseling. I wonder why. One of her main complaints is I gave her many concussions growing up. Oh my God. Sadly, I think she has a personality disorder. You can't heal without truth. Did this woman beat her child in the head? And this child now has concussions? And then someone says, "What did you do?" Not why did she have concussions, but what did you do to your precious daughter that requires her to be in support groups for years? To which this mother responds, she likes the attention. Yeah, I wonder why these kids don't want to talk to their parents, right? One more. This is from another parent. When my gay son said to me I should accept his lifestyle and not use my faith as a reason to not accept it, I knew we would need to go our separate ways. I have put him in God's hands now, which I think is Christianese for my son is dead to me because he's gay. So this is what these parents are talking about in this chat. Oh my God, I forgot the best one. Oh, I can't forget the best one. One commenter made the claim that her 19-year-old child, I'll just show it to you. I'll let you figure this one out for yourself. What if the adult child is 19 and identifying as a transgender bug? They saw a therapist that affirmed this. First of all, they don't identify as a transgender bug. That is not a thing that happens unless all you do all day is watch Fox News. But that didn't happen. Also, the therapist didn't affirm this. I don't know anyone involved in this story. I don't know who the therapist is. The therapist, whoever it is, did not affirm this because it's not a thing that happens. What the hell are you watching on TV? And what does Focus on the Family do? They do not say, "Hey, crazy lady who thinks her daughter is a transgender bug. No, why don't you talk to her? Why don't you go talk to this therapist with her so you can discuss some things?" No, nothing like that. What does Focus on the Family do? They say, "If you'd like to talk to one of our counselors for free, here's a link so you could do that." And this is the only comment Focus on the Family made to a number of these people chiming in. They did not address the harm they helped cause. They just said, "Oh, we put up that link that, hey, are you struggling right now?" And if people commented, they're like, "Here's a link to where we can give you help," as if they haven't done enough damage already. Now, a few people did try to point out the hypocrisy of Focus on the Family complaining about all this, and I do want to give them some props here. I'm going to say this as kind as I can, but if you raised your children according to the teachings of James Dobson, this is likely going to be the outcome for estrangement situations. His teachings were abusive, plain and simple, and some of you thought it was rubbish while reading it, but you still went against your own instincts and still did it Dobson's way. You can't sit around playing victim to a game you willingly played with your children. Fuck around and find out. Beautifully put. Another person tried to talk sense into some of the commenters, just saying, how can you even talk sense into these people when they're emotionally stunted? Look at this. Until Christian organizations wake up and realize family estrangement is because the adult parents are stunted emotionally at a toddler age and counseling doesn't even touch the root cause, ... Can a toddler do therapy? Beautiful. Though I will say, like right over here, this person says Focus on the Family has the resources. They could help fix this, but they're not doing that. And I don't like that we're saying Focus on the Family should be any part of the solution here, given the harm they've caused. But this is the point. Like, you have some people trying to explain what Focus on the Family has done, and none of these people are listening. They don't care. It's so disturbing. So the bottom line is that a lot of these parents assumed their kids would grow up to become like-minded conservative Christians. And they were never prepared by anybody to the possibility that your kids might disagree with you, and they might disagree with core aspects of your life, including your religion, including your sexual orientation. why are you surprised by that? I feel like I knew that when I brought kids into the world. Like, I hope we get along, but also I will do my best to raise them well, and then they're going to live their life. That's how it works. You're a moron if you just assume your kids will be carbon copies of you when they grow up. And this is the central problem with ministries like Focus on the Family. They act like estrangement is something that happens to parents rather than a consequence those parents brought about by listening to idiots like James Dobson. And they also refuse to admit that estrangement is not always a bad thing. For some children, even adult children, estrangement is the boundary they have established after years of rejection and abuse. And we're not even talking about like physical abuse, sexual shame, emotional trauma. Even if those things are absent, children learned in a lot of these Focus on the Family families that the only way they were ever going to be loved by their parents unconditionally is if they voted a certain way, married a certain kind of person, led the life their parents chose for them. And if you didn't do those things, guess what? That love was conditional. And now, guess what? They don't want to come home for Thanksgiving. They don't want to come home for Christmas. They might have kids of their own, but they are not letting the grandbabies see their grandparents because you don't deserve that. You can't have nice things. I'm not letting my kids be corrupted by you and I don't want my kids to deal with the shit you put me through. Like, if Focus really wanted to help these parents, they would admit their mistakes. They would burn an effigy of James Dobson. They would hire better experts in child rearing to rewrite all the shit James Dobson wrote. It won't solve the problems, but maybe it prevents future mistakes from happening. The children who walked away did not destroy these families. If anything, they were the first ones with the courage to break that cycle of abuse, and they should be applauded for that. All right, I will stop there. What questions we got here? More like focus on the I don't even know what that means anymore, but I like it. Focusing on the family, very analogous to a magnifying glass focusing sun on an anthill. Everyone caught in that ray is going to suffer. Exactly. Dobson was beyond words awful. Good thing he's no longer on this planet to harm people. No kidding. I feel that way about like Pat Robertson. I feel that way about a lot of people who are leaving. Like, I'm not praying for their death or anything like that. I don't have that thought in me, but I'm not going to mourn the fact that they're gone. I can judge them by what they did in their life. And a lot of people, they dedicated their life to harming others. And no one ever got through to them. No one ever taught them to not do that. They never learned it. I mean, yeah. Bye, Dobson. Yeah, if you beat your child constantly, why do you think that when they're an adult, they'll want anything to do with you? I seriously think a lot of these parents think when they grow up, they will understand why I beat them mercilessly. And a lot of these kids grow up and they're like, yeah, I do understand it. And that's why I want nothing to do with you. I will never understand the people who continue to spank their kids and who say things like, I was spanked as a child and it didn't affect me. Like, yeah, it did. You grew up to be an asshole who thinks violence is the solution. So there is something deeply broken about you. And the parents are shocked at the woke kids that want to cope with the abuse and still have the balls to talk about loving their kids. That's what I was reading. Comment after comment. A lot of very, very ignorant parents there. All right, I'm jumping to another story. One moment. I'm going to take it down a notch. The next one's not nearly as serious. Give me 1 second. Okay. By the way, side note, I saw comments that people were making in the last story about how they learned a lot about James Dobson from, is it Monty Mater on TikTok or Instagram, who does fantastic videos. Guess what? She's also going to be at NanoCon, and you can go sign up for tickets. I'm excited to meet Monty in a week or so. Okay, Getting to another story. This one's about statistics. But wait, don't leave. I want to tell you about what they're doing in Australia because it's kind of messed up. And I appreciate that there are atheists calling them out on this. So here's what's going on. Australia has a Bureau of Statistics. Their job is to, among other things, conduct the census. They do their census every 5 years. I mean, it's a way to understand the shifting demographics in the country. It's a treasure trove of information for data geeks. I love it. But when it comes to religion, they do ask people about their religious affiliation, but they do it wrong. And because they do it wrong, we're not getting good information. And this is the focus here. People want it to be fixed. And I will show you this. This is what they've gotten. Every 5 years, they do this survey. But look at what the census has shown. And right here, this is 2020. The 2021 census was the last one they did. And you could see over the years, over the past like 7 decades, you see in this photo, the percentage of Australians who are Christian has gone down significantly. It's under 50% now, but Christians are still in the majority or in the plurality, right? But no religion has gone up. It seems like when people leave Christianity, they're becoming non-religious. They're not going to another religion either. So what's going to happen when they do the 2026 census? Well, if this is any indication, it looks like for the first time, no religion may very well surpass Christianity. And that will be a big story whenever the results are eventually published. So that's kind of the backdrop for this issue I want to talk about, which is I want to show you how they asked this question a few years ago. In 2011, this is the question that was on the Australian census. What is the person's religion? And they gave you those options. Are you Catholic, Anglican, ... or are you other? Please specify. And look at what they say in the instructions. This is an optional question. You don't have to answer it. Examples of other include Salvation Army, Hinduism, Judaism, humanism. Humanism? Like, okay. What's the next thing they say? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me remove my face from this because you're going to see something else that's weird. Look at no religion stuck way the hell down there. So this is kind of messed up, isn't it? Let me scroll in there. Not only is no religion way down here for people who will read it, which you know they won't. Think about what this is saying. What's your religion? If I was looking at this list and I was an atheist, I would say, well, it's none of those. According to the instructions, if I'm a humanist, I should write it in right over here. But also there's a separate thing for no religion. Which of those do I put down? Like, what do I fill out? I don't know. This is very, very confusing. Like, what am I supposed to do with it? You're not going to get accurate information this way. So that was a dumb way to ask that question in 2011. So guess what they did in 2016? The next time they did the census, they fixed it a little bit. They heard your complaints. They fixed it a bit. And here's what they did. What is the person's religion? And this time, no religion is at the very top. Great. And then they have their list. Islam is on the Hinduism, made it to the checkbox this time, but also other, please specify. So if I'm an atheist, do I say no religion and then do I write in atheist? What if I'm a humanist? Do I say no religion and then write in humanist? Look at on the left the instructions. Examples of other, humanism. Well, then what do I do? Again, do I say no religion or do I write in humanist? I don't know. This is a dumb question that I do not know how to resolve. Now, I will say, apparently the data collector said if you wrote in humanist here, they would lump it into no religion. They had a way of resolving it. But again, you understand that the design of this question is bad because it's so damn confusing. What do you want people to fill out? And also, if you leave an open box for someone who is not one of the main religions, do you seriously think they're going to write in their religion right there? That's a hard thing to do. So bad question in 2016 as well. Also, I want to go back to one other thing. What's the question they're asking? What is the person's religion? There is an implicit bias right there because they're assuming you have a religion and that it's a good thing if you have a religion, right? Hey, sir, what's your job? Well, that makes it sound like I need a job because I really don't want to say I'm unemployed. But here they're saying, what is your religion? As if you should have one and it should have a label. Like, it's coercive in a way. It makes it sound like you should definitely check off a box here. And imagine you can absolutely see a scenario where someone was raised as a Catholic, doesn't go to church anymore, isn't religious anymore, but they see a question, hey, what's your religion? And they're like, well, I don't think about religion anymore, but I was raised as a Catholic, so I'm going to write down that I'm Catholic. They're getting misinformation then because of the way the question is designed. So, a lot of problems. People in Australia who understand this stuff are still complaining. So in 2021, guess what they did this time? They said, don't worry, everybody, we're fixing it in 2021. And here's how they fixed it in 2021. What is your religion? They didn't fix that. No religion is still at the top. But this time they said, in the category of other, you may write atheism. You will clearly see that none of this resolved anything. This is the same stupid question as always. I guess it's good that atheism is specifically listed as other because it's not no religion. It's so freaking weird. Don't lump me in to the people who believe in like horoscopes and bullshit up there. Those are not my people. Okay. So the point is, the reason I bring all this up, those were the last 3 times they did the census. And every time they ask this question, and it gets dumber and dumber for very different reasons. And yet, despite all that, you saw the chart at the beginning. Christianity has gone down. No religion has gone up over the years. What would happen if you actually asked the question the right way? That is what people are wondering. And then you have to think about this. Since the 2016 census, think about the changes that have happened in Australia. Marriage equality got legalized. Subjects like euthanasia and abortion became hot topics, and conservative religious views on those topics, they lost over and over because people were fighting the church on death with dignity. They were fighting the church on abortion rights. The church was the bad guy. And if you wanted to respect human rights, you did not join what the church was doing. More Australians, I think, have come to realize that if you want a sense of moral decency, if you have any moral decency, it is incompatible with the bigoted views of the most powerful religious groups in the country. And on top of that, there have been a lot of scandals in recent years involving very prominent Christian preachers like Brian Houston of Hillsong. Also, there have been pushes by non-religious groups over the years urging people to mark no religion on the census. They asked everybody, the atheist groups, the humanist groups, they said, hey, everybody, census is coming up soon. We want everybody to write no religion. And they actually pushed people who don't think about religion. They would put up billboards and everything. And they said, if you don't go to church anymore and you don't think about religion anymore, it's okay to say you are not religious. Just say that on the census. Don't say what you were when you were a child. Seriously, they put up billboards for this. And that's why we've seen this jump in the non-religious numbers. Australia is witnessing a massive shift in its religious identity. And that appears to be the case, even though the people at the census keep asking the question the wrong way every single time. So, over the past couple of years, Australia has been gearing up to the 2026 census. And one of the things they do is they take feedback from people. What do we need to change before we go out and start asking people these questions? And in 2023, a coalition of non-theistic organizations in Australia, they asked the Bureau of Statistics to change the question. And specifically, and this is very clever, they said, we want you to do it a different way. Here's what they wanted to do. They said, here's what you ask. Do you have a religion? If they say no, they are marked under no religion. If they say yes, then you ask a follow-up question, what is your religion? And you leave it open-ended. That's how they wanted the question to be asked. And by asking it that way, not only would the assumption that everyone has a religion disappear, it would allow people to offer their own religious labels rather than selecting from a very short, predetermined list of very popular ones. And guess what the Bureau of Statistics did? They actually tested this out. This is from the Bureau of Statistics. They tested this out. They said, does the person have a religion? No or yes. And if yes, specify the religion. And they have a whole bunch of options listed right here. Yeah, man, that's a great way to ask this question. I love it. They tested this option. And then guess what happened after they did that? They announced last year, actually, it wasn't last year. They announced this in 2025. I want to show it to you. This is from the Bureau of Statistics website. In 2024, the Australian Bureau of Statistics continued to consult with religious and secular organizations on the data needs that would be met or impacted if we changed the religion question in 2026. The feedback from consultation highlighted it is not possible to design a question that will meet the range of needs identified. We can't do it, you guys. It's too hard. In addition, understanding the impact that a question change would have on response patterns and comparability between censuses requires more testing than was possible with the time that we had. So basically, they're saying the whole point of a census is you want to you want to track change over time. And they said if we ask the question a different way, we're not going to be able to compare apples to apples. And we don't really know how things are tracked. So we got to ask it the same way again so we actually see what the trends are, even though the question has been changed in the past. So that's a weird explanation. But the bottom line is Australia said, we understand you want to change it. No, we're going to ask the question the same way we did 5 years ago. And too bad for the rest of you. I mean, we're just going to do it. They also said the one concession they made is they will remove atheism from the list of other, so that if you're an atheist, you're more likely to say no religion. But also, there is a reason they're not changing it. And this was brought to my attention by Cy Gladman of the Rationalist Society of Australia. He said that the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, they literally asked the government not to change the question. They lobbied the government not to change the question because it would lead to, quote, unwarranted complication for people who wish to record their religion. I don't know what the hell that means, but here's, to my understanding, what he did. He said, please don't change the question because if you do, way too many people are going to say no religion and it's going to look really bad for the Catholic Church. So can you not make the change? And the government said, we're not making the change. I'm not saying the Catholic Church is the only reason that happened, but it's not hard to connect two dots. So here's why I bring all this up. More recently, a group of atheists, there's a coalition called Not Religious, Mark No Religion. That's the weirdly awkward name for that group. They decided we're just going to run our own census. It won't be as big, obviously, but let's conduct our own poll and see what happens when you ask the religion question the old way, which is the way the country's doing it in 2026, and the way we wish it was asked. They ran the poll. They paid an outside company to do it for them. And guess what they found? If you do it the old way, here's what they found. 43% of Australians said no religion if they are answering the question the way the census plans to ask the question this year. 43% say they are non-religious. But guess what happens when you ask it the way it should be asked? Do you have a religion? No. Or do you have a religion? If yes, what is it? What happens then? 53% of Australians say they have no religion. The difference between these two questions is huge. Huge. And what this means, this translates to a difference of about 2 million more adults without religion if you use the right question instead of the one the country's actually going with. Amazing. Amazing. And the group said as they published these results, listen, there's nothing, we just want to bring this to your attention that when the census happens, whatever the non-religious numbers are, because everyone seems well aware that no religion is going to overtake Christianity. Everyone seems to know that's going to happen. But whatever that number is, it's still not as high as it should be for the non-religious because of the bad way the census is asking the question. And they want to bring that to people's attention. And they did say in their statement, quote, "We've already got our eyes on 2031. So they are going to keep pushing to make the census ask the question the correct way 5 years from now. And I find, as a data geek, as someone who cares about demographics and like how it's changing to be non-religious, I love that they are still pushing for this. It's been years that they've been working on this campaign and they're still going for it. But yeah, whatever the difference turns out to be between non-religious and Christians, just realize the actual gap is probably much larger. All right, I'm going to stop there. What question do we have here? It's getting close to overlap and no religion becoming the majority. That's right. That's what has been happening over the past couple of decades. So yeah, it looks like non-religious is going to be the largest single group. The question, though, is whether they are literally the majority of Australians if they hit that 50% mark. And based on the way the census is asking the question, it doesn't look like they're going to hit 50, but they could be the biggest single group out there, non-religious. Stop lumping my atheism in with religion, please. Yeah, don't put atheism and humanism with people who are like, I believe there's something up there, but I don't define it. Like, we are very different people. Now, the one thing I will say about the downside of the, do you have a religion? No. Do you have a religion? If yes, tell us what it is that there's no follow-up question for no. Because I kind of want to know among the non-religious, what percentage are atheists? What percentage are humanists? What percentage are whatever other label you want to use? Because it's not like non-religion comes in one flavor. And I feel like we'd be missing out on that information using the old way / current way, or the way the atheists want it to look. I still want more information and I wouldn't be getting it from the census, even with the new way. No answer percentage increased. I don't know what that means. Oh, the percentage in the old version and the new version of people who did not want to answer the question was, what was it? It's like 1.6% didn't want to answer the question the old way, and about 3.7 didn't want to answer it this time around. A little change, but not a huge change. All right, I'm going to jump to another story here. One moment. Talk amongst yourselves for 2 minutes. I just got a couple more for you here. Okay. We've heard stories about public high school coaches who push their religion on students, right? The most famous example of that is Joe Kennedy. He was that high school football coach in Washington State who demanded the right to pray at midfield on the football field right after the final whistle so that everyone could watch him pray because that's what Jesus wanted. And the Supreme Court said, yep, that's legal now. That's the most famous example, but there are always examples of other coaches, lesser known coaches, pushing religion on kids. And one of these took place last year in Redding, California. Redding is home, I believe, to Bethel the Church of like Supernatural Harry Potter Ministry, where they believe they're all wizards and shit. But one of them took place in Reading at a public school called Enterprise High School. And the person who did this is this guy right here. His name is A-B-I-E. I don't know how you pronounce that, but A.B. Ramirez. And he's the basketball coach. And apparently, he told his students that they needed to fill out this journal. Can you see that? You could see that. It's the Empowered Christian Athlete Journal. He handed this out to his team members. And the thing about this journal is it says it will help students who want to perform at their best in sports, school, and life by grounding their strength in Christ. And students are asked to complete journal entries about, some of this stuff is normal. Tell me about a time you failed. Tell me what you learned from it. And there might be value to a secular version of that book, but this one includes Bible verses that are supposed to help you with self-improvement because, of course, the ultimate goal is to make sure you convert. And that's why this is a problem. In fact, the book's creator, a guy named Derek Ward, he openly brags on social media about how religion is necessary to be the best version of yourself. He describes this journal as a mindset and faith training system. So it's bad enough that this basketball coach handed this journal out to all of his team members, but apparently it wasn't just for like shits and giggles. He got a whole bunch of them from church and he gave them to kids or something. That would have been bad. But also, apparently, if the kids did not complete pages of this journal, there were punishments to go along with it. And I know this because one of the parents of a student on that team saved the text messages he sent to the children. And I just want to show you some of this. This is all from the coach to the students. Journal pages completed up to 11. If you forget today, it's DBL. It's double the running. I need to know who did not get a backpack. Let me know. Blah, blah, blah. What else? Reminder, practice 12 to 2. Bring journals to check off. You know who you are. No excuses. So this coach is not only saying you got to do this journal, but if you don't, I'm going to make you run twice as much as everybody else. Like there's a punishment if you don't do the Jesus book. So the parent who took that screenshot apparently contacted the Freedom from Religion Foundation, who wrote a letter back in April to this school, and they laid out exactly what they knew. The parent who contacted us explained they are very angered and disappointed that a Christian-based journal would be pushed at a public school and our child would be disciplined for not participating. They went on to say that they are not a religious family and that the faith-based journal assignments cross the constitutional line. The district must immediately investigate the situation and ensure that Coach Ramirez ceases pushing religion onto students in violation of the First Amendment. So that was the letter from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And they also pointed out, they cited Coach Kennedy here. In contrast to what Coach Kennedy did, if you want to use that as a defense, by the way, in contrast, Coach Ramirez repeatedly coerced students to participate in Christian journaling as part of official team activities. And any students who failed to complete the journal assignments faced punishment. Coach Kennedy was like, I'm going to do this myself. I don't need any kids to join in with me, and I'm not going to punish them if they don't. So you can't even use that in defense here. Well, guess what happened after they sent that letter? It worked. The district wrote back to FFRF, and this is what they said. See, don't tell me I never share good news with you. In response to your letter, the district conducted an investigation into the matter and confirmed that the journal was used. Upon completion of the investigation, we informed the coach that the use of the journal in this context should not continue moving forward. In addition, the district will provide training and guidance to staff to ensure a clear understanding of expectations to help prevent similar situations from occurring in the future. So, good news, like FFRF got what they wanted, which is the rights of the student and parents were respected. And the district's like, yeah, you were right. And also, we're going to train our staff. So that just means they're going to force another training onto staffers, all because one coach couldn't keep his religion in his pants. I haven't heard any statement from the coach himself. I haven't heard anything else from the district. The coach has not said, "Oh, sorry, my bad. I shouldn't have done that." Which makes me wonder, I mean, I get why the district said this. They want to avoid a lawsuit. But also, I want some sort of acknowledgement from the coach that what he did was wrong. Because all he learned from this whole thing is I got to be more subtle in how I push my religion onto kids. But anyway, thanks to one student and the kid's parents, this coach isn't going to be able to push his religion onto kids anymore because that's coercion and that is wrong. And it's also why these cases deserve a lot more attention than I think they usually receive. Because if an atheist coach told students they need to reject God because all you have on the court is yourself, I think it would be covered nonstop in right-wing media. I don't think this story will get any coverage whatsoever. And I just want to point out the district didn't really reprimand the coach at all. They just said, we talked to him. He won't do it again. Okay. Did you punish him any other way? Nope. Not as far as I can tell. There's no strike on his record. It seems like this was barely a slap on the wrist at best. So what deterrent is that for other coaches who might want to do the same thing? I don't know. So good news, kind of. All right. What questions you got here? Otherwise, I got one more story for you afterwards. Would I still have to run if my responses were illegible? I appreciate this kind of malicious compliance. And the answer is probably no, because I don't believe any of these coaches are reading this shit. I'm glad that when he got back to coaching, this is talking about Joe Kennedy, the football coach. I'm glad that when he got back to coaching, because the Supreme Court reinstated his job, and he went to pray, everyone just left. That is true. The media got some pictures at game 1, and then the media left because this was no longer a story. And what did Coach Kennedy do after the first game was over and he did his prayer at midfield? He quit because he didn't give a shit about those kids. This was about him and getting attention. And when he realized no one was going to watch him anymore, he's like, well, then why am I still in Washington? I'm going to move to Florida. And he did. All right. Someone's asking, I wonder if this guy in this school in California, is he a Fellowship of Christian Athletes coach? And the answer is, I don't know, but this is very much the sort of thing an FCA coach would do. All right, let me jump to another story here. Last one. Okay. Do you remember January 6th? Of course you do. All the Trump insurrectionists, they went to the Capitol, they rioted, they broke into the Capitol building, they beat up officers, one of their own was shot in the process. Like, it was a whole mess. But after January 6th happened, you may recall that the House, which at the time was controlled by Democrats, they had the House Select Committee. Actually, I take that back. I don't remember if the House was controlled by Democrats, but there was a Select Committee that was formed where Democrats and Republicans could name their people to join that committee. And the thing is, Republicans initially were like, wow, this is bad. We condemn Trump, and they were all backing away from him. But eventually, they all realized their own political lives were in danger if they backed away from Trump, so they did not impeach. They did impeach him, but the Senate did not get rid of him, which is why Trump is president now. But when that bipartisan select committee was formed, who were the Republicans on it? Well, the Republican leader at the time said, I want to put a couple of like MAGA cultists on the committee. And Nancy Pelosi was like, hell no, I reject those people. And the only Republicans who would do it then, I think Republicans thought, haha, you said no to our people, so this is going to be a Democratic thing and we could dismiss it and Fox News will dismiss it. But 2 Republicans were invited to join the committee and they said yes, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. So it was a bipartisan effort with two serious Republicans who took January 6th seriously, and they had primetime hearings where they played video of like Josh Hawley running away scared, even though he made the fist at the rioters, right? Do you remember all that? Well, at the end of all of that, at the end of that January 6th House Committee uh, investigation, the whole point of it was to produce one report, a special report that documented what happened on January 6th so that it would never happen again. That's why they have these investigations, these committees. And I don't know in the chaos of everything if anyone actually read the final report, but it was 845 pages. And I want to show you one thing in there because they're talking about the sort of people who came to the Capitol on January 6th. And I want to show you one reference to Nick Fuentes, the far right extremist whose followers are called Groypers. And it says right here, Fuentes, this is on page 546. Fuentes and a fellow Groyper leader, Patrick Casey, rose to prominence in 2017 after rallying at the Charlottesville Unite the Right event. For years, the Groypers have repeatedly promoted white supremacist and Christian nationalist beliefs, often cloaked in wink and nod humor, puns, or religion, and they regularly gin up public opposition to other right-wing organizations or politicians whom they deem insufficiently conservative. Why do I mention that to you? Because this is the only time in 845 pages that the report on January 6th mentions Christian nationalism. That's it. There were flags outside while the Capitol was on fire. There were flags that are the appeal to heaven flag and the Christian flag. And you cannot talk about January 6th without bringing up the role that right-wing Christianity played in that situation. In fact, when this report was released in 2020, was it 2022, like long after January 6th, the Washington Post ran an article about this. Faith leaders ask why January 6th report left out Christian nationalism, which is a good question. And look at this. Officer Daniel Hodges of the DC Police told the select committee tasked with investigating the insurrection that it was clear the terrorists perceived themselves to be Christian. Here's Adam Kinzinger, the Republican. Had there not been some of these errant prophecies, this idea that God has ordained it to be Trump, I'm not sure January 6th would have happened like it did. That was Kinzinger talking on a Christianity Today podcast. The point being, a lot of these Christians who stormed the Capitol, they did it because they believed God wanted Trump to stay in power and that the election results that said Biden won were illegitimate. And that's why they were storming the Capitol, because God wanted Trump to stay in power. And if you didn't have the religious angle there, a lot of these people may not have been motivated to do what they did. So yeah, why wasn't it mentioned in the damn report? Look at this. In the days before the assault, Jericho marchers, inspired by the book of Joshua, circled Capitol Hill. When rioters stormed the Capitol, they huddled in prayer. You may have seen the video posted by the New Yorker magazine, where once they were inside the chambers of Congress, these guys said a prayer from like the pulpit of where the speaker usually stands. So religion was all over January 6th, and yet the final report mentioned Christian nationalism by name only once and only in passing, and that's the section I just read to you. And basically the question is, what the hell? How do you have a report on January 6th and not really mention Christian nationalism when that is a key ingredient to what happened? You are leaving out the most important section. You're yada-ing over the most important bit. You can't do that. What the hell is wrong with you? And it was disturbing at the time because, as we've seen, Christian nationalism has only grown worse over time. We are run now by a government that is full of Christian nationalists. So what the hell is going on? The party is a party of Christian nationalism. And by the way, it's not like they didn't know Christian nationalism was a thing. There was testimony there were witnesses at the hearings who called out all of this. And the Washington Post article, the last paragraph of that article says this: the precise reason for Christian nationalism's general absence from the report remains a mystery. Now, they did cite one person offering a reason, but it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I bring that up because this week I had the honor of speaking to Jared Huffman, the congressman from California who is the only openly humanist member of Congress, and someone who founded the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. He is kind of the leading voice, other than Jamie Raskin, the co-founder of that caucus. He's one of the leading voices, not for atheism in government, but as a non-religious person in Congress, he understands the threat of Christian nationalism, and I should say white Christian nationalism. And I asked him about this because he just wrote a new book called No Prophets. And he brings up the fact that Christian nationalism is a threat, remains a threat, it will be a threat, and yet it was not mentioned in January 6th. And I want you to hear what he told me and what he writes in his book about why Christian nationalism did not make it into the report. And this is a longer clip, but I think you should hear the whole thing.
So how did it get erased totally from the report that was supposed to be the definitive statement of what the hell happened, how it was planned and orchestrated and carried out, and holding all the various operators to account? Because of one person, Liz Cheney. And I explained this is not something you're going to really hear or read about anywhere else. But I talked to my colleagues on the select committee. I talked to staffers. I talked to other folks who knew the inside story. And the committee, you may remember that Republicans won the midterm elections that year. And so the committee was kind of rushing to finish its final report in 2022 before Kevin McCarthy took over and probably deep sixed the entire select committee and all of its work. So there was urgency in finishing this report, and they also needed it to be bipartisan. And this is where Liz Cheney really took on a lot of power. She was the vice chair of this committee, and she was the main credential to make it bipartisan. She knew she could veto anything in there that she wanted. She was fine with entire sections on Roger Stone and the Proud Boys and all of these other, actors and players. But there was a prominent section on Christian nationalist extremism. It was written up by this staff group that they called the Purple Team. And pretty much everyone else on the select committee wanted it in, including Republican Adam Kinzinger, who told me that he thinks that these Christian nationalists were like the entire story of the insurrection. And he's an evangelical, so he was pretty attuned to this. Liz Cheney vetoed it. She said, I'm not going to sign on to anything that would offend decent Christians around the country. So that's how it was erased. And it was because it was, too explosive for Liz Cheney.
One person deep sixed all the Christian nationalist stuff from the definitive account of January 6th. And I want to show, and by the way, side note, I never understood for the life of me the strategy of the Kamala Harris campaign, who tried so damn hard to campaign with Liz Cheney under the assumption that doing so would show bipartisanship and you could win over some sort of moderate voter who sees like, oh, she's listening to a Republican, I will now vote for her. Because in my mind, those people don't really exist. And also by going with Liz Cheney, like a warmonger, and her dad is horrible, and someone who doesn't get the threat of Christian nationalism, you are alienating your own base who you absolutely need. I don't get that strategy. I don't understand centrist, moderate Democrats. There are some cases where I dislike them more than I dislike Republicans in many ways, but I don't get that at all. I want to show you what Jared Huffman actually wrote in his new book, which comes out next month. He talked about the Purple Team, which worked on the Christian nationalism aspect of it all. Chairman Benny Thompson, a Democrat from, I believe, Mississippi, told me, We asked the Purple Team to look into the role of religion in what happened, and they came back with a report that shows those people, right-wing Christian extremists, actually had a lot to do with it. Then came the veto. Liz Cheney made it clear. That part of the Purple Team's work would not see daylight. Everyone understood her value. Her imprimatur gave the final report bipartisan credibility, which it doesn't need, I promise you. That's why she had been named vice chair, and she knew it. And he also says after they made appeals to her, Cheney would not budge. Facing a looming deadline and with no real alternative, the committee relented. There would be no religion in the January 6th committee report. That part of the insurrection was buried, not because it lacked evidence, but because it was the proverbial cigarette in the bomb factory, just too damn explosive, which is what he said in our interview. I want to show you one last thing, which is going back to that Washington Post article from 2022. They referenced Liz Cheney, but look at how they said it at the time. The precise reason for Christian nationalism's general absence from the report remains a mystery. A recent Washington Post investigation into the document's drafting quoted Jeremy Adler, a spokesman for Representative Liz Cheney, who sits on the committee, as saying the Wyoming lawmaker won't sign on to any narrative regarding January 6th that suggests every American who believes God has blessed America is a white supremacist. And everything about that is wrong because white Christian nationalism isn't even a racist thing. And Christian nationalism is very distinct from just straight up Christianity. No one was saying Christianity was the problem. No one was saying if you think God blesses our country, you're the problem. Christian nationalism is a real thing. It is a real problem. And Liz Cheney's mistake here is she is conflating white Christian nationalism with an attack on Christians. And she, of all people, could have fixed that misconception. But instead, because she's too ignorant on this subject, she just said, you can't mock Christians for January 6th. So she nixed all this important stuff. She's wrong. I mean, I asked Jared Huffman about this as well. How do we separate? How do we criticize Christian nationalism without people accusing us of attacking Christianity in general? And the honest answer is there's no good way to do it. Like the Fox News right-wing people are always going to find ways to accuse you of attacking Christianity, but you can't let that dictate very real criticisms of Christian nationalism. I also asked him, so the Purple Team did write up a report about Christian nationalism, even though it didn't make it into the final draft or final report. Can we see a draft of what they wrote? And he said he has tried to get his hands on it, but as far as he knows, it's nowhere to be found. So no, he doesn't have a copy of their report. But that means the January 6th definitive history is missing one of its largest things, and it may be one of the most lingering weapons that has come to fruition over the past couple of years. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you didn't hate Liz Cheney enough, or you thought she was a good person because she did oppose Trump, you don't have to like her. She's not a good person. All right, I will leave it at that. What questions do we have here? Christian nationalist dogma seems to require denying that Christian nationalism exists. Two thoughts on this. One is I find some value to this, like a Fight Club mentality that says we'll never talk about it, except plenty of Christian nationalists are now saying when they're campaigning, I'm a proud Christian nationalist. I'm a Christian and I love America. So they're trying to redefine it in a way that allows them to send winks to their extremist base. So she played partisan hack and got what she deserved for it, snubbed by Trump and maggots. Yeah, I mean, she was bipartisan. She was good about January 6th overall. She did say Trump was bad. He was in the wrong. He needed to be impeached. I will give her credit for that. But beyond that, like she lost her House seat to a more MAGA person. And it's not like Democrats want anything to do with her now, because why would we? As we shouldn't. But like, it's weird that Adam Kinzinger is the voice of reason among the Republicans in that group, as someone who's from Illinois. How long has it been that Republicans have tried to revise history? How old is America now? Like they've always been trying to rewrite history, but when they have the levers of power as they do now, they're in overdrive, whether it's changing up like national parks and rewriting how we took over native lands, rewriting stuff that's in the Smithsonian, trying to put Trump on everything. I mean, they're rewriting it now. And the question is, how much of it will they get away with before it's too late? And if Democrats can retake control of the House, at least there can be investigations with teeth into some of this. And if Democrats ever get control of the government again, which is a hard ask, maybe they can actually fix some stuff. Maybe they learned their lessons. I don't think dropping Christian nationalism was out of ignorance, but rather for obfuscation. What was Liz Cheney thinking when she did it? Was it because she was ignorant or because she knew it could hurt the party? I mean, could be both, right? But equating Christian nationalism with a criticism of Christianity, that is BS. Like the members of Congress who are calling out Christian nationalism, they're very much not anti-Christian. Atheists, the sort of people you might watch on YouTube, leave that criticism to people like us. We can trash Christianity all you want, but like Jared Huffman's not anti-Christian. So there is a difference, and the fact that some people refuse to acknowledge that difference is a detriment to our whole country. All right, we're out. Next week, I should be back at the normal time on Thursday night, I promise. Thank you for sticking around on this weird Wednesday afternoon of sorts. Thank you to Jess for handling all the comments and everything. Everyone give her a round of applause and say thank you in the comments. And remember, you could support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. And I hope you subscribe to the newsletter. That's my main thing. Go to friendlyatheist.com and subscribe. I will see you next week. Have a good one. Be safe.